Welcome back to Breaking Views. We're talking about China's new leadership. Brand new, unveiled the top team, 7 people. No huge surprises in terms of the makeup of that team, but a lot of analysis to be done about who they are and really how prepared they are for the challenge of running China for the next 5 and possibly 10 years. John Foley is with me. John, you've done some report card kind of analysis of this team. What have you come up with on the positive front?
Well, Peter, I think to keep things simple, there are a couple of things that are quite good about this new leadership. One is that they've got much more international experience than their predecessors. You've got a Premier, Li Keqiang, who speaks English, which is a great development. We've got a couple in there who've had foreign educations. I mean, still, most of these people have spent most of their time at home, but this is a generation that's seen much more of the outside world than its predecessors, so that could be good for US ties.
And then other good factors seem to be they've also had some experience of managing crises.
Well, they've certainly been through lots of crises. So Wang Qishan, he's referred to as the firefighter of the party. He's cleaned up credit crises in Guangdong and Hainan province. He also was brought to Beijing after the SARS crisis. So he's seen as being quite a safe pair of hands. But then you also have other kinds of crises that weren't handled quite so well. So Li Keqiang, the premier, was in Henan province after an AIDS crisis where blood donors were being infected with HIV. He also was in that province during a series of fatal fires, so he earned the nickname of Three Fires Li at one stage. Also, Zhang Dejiang, who was the Chongqing party chief, but before that he was the premier in charge of railways when high-speed rail crash and railway corruption scandals were all over the headlines. So there have been good and bad kinds of crisis. Mostly the reaction has been to clamp down rather than to open up, but at least they've had practice of going through hard times.
Right. And then there's a couple of other factors that you've looked at where they don't score so highly, particularly on the diversity front.
Yeah, really not very diverse at all. There was one woman who might have had a shot at being on the standing committee, Liu Yendong. She's nowhere to be seen, of course. So again, you have 7 identical guys, all from the Han racial majority in China. They're a bit more diverse than their predecessors. We've got some, arts graduates in there. Wang Qishan studied history, which is a term for the books because China's leaders are normally all scientists. But effectively, if these people are supposed to represent the masses fully, which Xi Jinping said yesterday that he wants to, this selection doesn't really represent the full diversity of China.
No, and of course, and as you point out also in your article, John, the majority of them still also with ties to Jiang Zemin, the ex-president, which also suggests that maybe they will be more interested in making sure the party leaders remain rich rather than sort of redistributing the wealth. One final question. You come up with a score of 6.5 out of 10 for this new team. Where does the half point come from?
Well, I thought that, to be fair, they deserved an extra half point for a couple of reasons. One is that Hu Jintao, who's the outgoing president, has given up all of his titles, including the head of the army, which is good. It's a clean break. And his predecessor, Jiang Zemin, didn't do that. The other is that they kind of shook the order up a bit. They came out on stage in a different order from what was expected, and any tiny change is seen as a good sign. And finally, Xi Jinping, the new president, seems to have a bit of charisma. He's got a personality. He gave a speech where he didn't really use much jargon, and people seem to quite like what he had to say. So there is enough to be encouraged by in what we saw yesterday.
So there you have it, according to Breaking Views, 6.5 out of 10 for China's new leadership. I guess over the next 5 and possibly 10 years, we'll be seeing whether they can live up to that score.